You don't understand what's at stake. But how can you? That's a burden that only I here carry. Time. Arcane is dangerous, Jace. A force of nature. Science cannot control it. All my life I've pursued the mysteries of science, only to discover some are better left unsolved. Breakthrough like this takes time, Victor. Putting that kind of power into everyone's hands is dangerous. I've seen nations destroyed by a single seed, and it looked exactly Jace, like this is a violation of the ethos. I will have it destroyed one way or another. Jace, don't do this. I wanted to offer my guidance, but it seems I'm unwelcome.
Heimerdinger is right.
Yes, indeed, right on the money.
Income.
I was looking at older videos I made 2 years ago, and I thought it would be interesting to look back into this short video I made about how right Heimerdinger was. Also, shout out to this commenter that suggested I do make a longer video. But yes, I also wanted to expand my thoughts further, so today, fellow minds, we explore the lessons of government, the socio-political landscape of Piltover, and how Heimerdinger in all this was actually correct. Let's delve deep into this ancient furry ball's arcane mind here in Mine Mind. Alright, before we analyze Heimerdinger's stances through his dialogue and scenes, we first must understand who he is, his background, his accomplishments, his life, and what type of being he is. These are very important at laying a groundwork and understanding his stances and motivations in the show. So, Heimerdinger is a yordle, a magic-based species in Runeterra. Yordles, in short, well, they are short. They're literally short, little large-headed and long-eared creatures. Their appearance, except for the aforementioned, may vary, however, but what is important for our discussion is that yordles are made from the arcane, from magic, and are actually immortal and cannot die. One of the relatively recent champions, a yordle named Vex, literally wants and tries to die in her story, but due to the nature of being a yordle and the yordle's immortality, well, she simply can't die, much to her chagrin, unfortunately. But yes, those are yordles, and Heimerdinger is one of them. And recall how old Heimerdinger was.
I am now 307 years old.
And note that it was he who founded Piltover along with some other individuals, and as implied amidst the ongoing rune wars, where he witnessed firsthand, mind you, firsthand, how powerful mages basically waging war on each other using the arcane. And in all that time, after the rune wars and the founding of Piltover, Heimerdinger has been a professor and counselor for about 200 years, managing to uplift what was once, remind you, just a bunch of refugees from the rune wars from all over Valoran and Shurima, the two main continents in Runeterra, to become eventually an internationally acclaimed technological and commerce center city-state, being touted as the city of progress overseas. All that under the guiding governance of Heimerdinger. So keep these in mind. He himself is very in tune with magic since he is a yordle, which might explain certain weird depictions of him in some scenes later on in the series, and in his immortality witnessed firsthand the devastation individuals can cause when corrupted with the power of arcane magic. Not to mention his extensive experience and implied competence as a government and academic official before he was voted out by Jace. Already we see and can establish his competence via his credentials, but let's look at what exactly he was saying throughout the show, starting with his introductory scene in Jace's cell. So, in this scene, Heimerdinger briefly mentions, which he will expand on later in the council chamber, his stance that the arcane is far too volatile and powerful to be controlled, and that perhaps such an endeavor wouldn't be worth it or even shouldn't be done in the first place. He illustrates the arcane as a force of nature that shouldn't be attempted to be controlled or manipulated, especially through science by non-arcane talented individuals. This idea is actually akin to the fundamental principles of Taoism, wherein it is advised that trying to control great forces outside of yourself will only lead to more problems and is in truth in vain. The point is that even if one could control the arcane, it might actually backfire due to the unforeseen factors given the scope of the force trying to be controlled or refined. And in the council chamber, as Jace is being tried, Heimerdinger butts in to further elaborate on this point, adding that such raw and vast power corrupts people more potently, and that the risk is not just corrupt officials, which we will explore later, but the destruction of entire swaths of civilization. Evidenced by him witnessing firsthand the Rune Wars, and this was even seconded by Councillor Shula when she mentioned that Heimerdinger founded Piltover to be a bastion and sanctuary against the quote-unquote warmongering of mages. So in these first two scenes, given Heimerdinger's context, we can clearly see why he has himself and instilled in Piltover some aversion to magical practices. But at least they're not as bad as the Nazis, I mean Demacians. Yes, those guys are definitely not Nazi-coded at all. But going back to Piltover, these scenes attempt to display Heimerdinger as some sort of boomer who can't let go and move on from the past, and is actually hindering progress himself. But given the context and the principles he was espousing, this is actually not the case. All he was saying is that given what he witnessed firsthand, the arcane is just simply far too vast, too potent and volatile to be entrusted to be used responsibly by the people. Because, as he observed over 200 years ago, even those talented in the arcane themselves were susceptible to its corruption, let alone the common folk. And that actually goes to his other point seen throughout the show.
No great science should ever put lives in danger.
So we already established the risks of the arcane magic itself. But now another emphasis Heimerdinger was driving at is that any endeavor for progress and innovation should not at all endanger the lives of the people, especially those it was being endeavored to help in the first place. Which goes back actually to the whole backfiring aspect of his stance, and that is why in the arguably the most controversial scene where Heimerdinger is being painted as an out-of-touch elitist, after Jason Victor's presentation, if we actually listen to what he is trying to say, what he's saying, and not to how the scene is trying to portray him as, also given the established context about his life and experiences, he was actually saying the right things to Jace and Victor.
Obviously, there are a few kinks to iron out and screws to be tightened, but give it a decade of careful research and it will be ready.
A decade?
Oh, don't worry, my boy. It zips past you in the blink of an eye.
With respect, Professor, we can be improving lives with Hex Tech now.
A breakthrough like this takes time, Victor. Putting that kind of power into everyone's hands is dangerous.
Heimerdinger is right.
Keep at it, and I'm sure you will discover a way to safeguard Hex Tech against misuse.
Yes, given his expertise as a scientist, government official, and primary source historian, he probably knows this to be true. As we know, he knows the corrupting power of the arcane on mages, let alone possibly on normal people, and how that led to the shambling of peoples throughout the world to migrate across continents. And in his long tenure as a civil servant, he knows how to uplift people from poverty, from being migrants and refugees, and what is generally probably good for them. Not to mention that he probably, at least to some extent, is aware of the signs of governmental and institutional corruption present in his own city. People might say that he is not aware of how self-interested a lot of the mercantile classes are in his city, but given his intellect, I find it hard to believe that he can't sense at least some amount of that when he witnesses or at least knows about people like this in Piltover and the Undercity.
Am I to tell the Noxians their next shipment of wine will be vinegar?
I had quite a shock this morning. Enforcers banging on my door.
Said that we've never had the opportunity to speak.
Dimmer, body replacements? We've seen their ingenuity over the years, of course they can.
And Jace and Victor should be aware of this as well, aware of the corrupt merchants, aware of Silco and Jinx, etc. All malicious agents that could possibly use Hextech for nefarious means and nefarious ends if they get their hands on it. I'd say it's very clear that Piltover society isn't the most ideal, and I think he is aware of this, and precisely why he, Heimerdinger, advised Jace and Victor to research and plan on how to properly regulate and safeguard Hextech even better from falling into the wrong hands and being misused. Look, the scenes try to paint Heimerdinger as merely nonchalantly dismissing Jace and Victor's progress with Hextech, but that actually is not the case. He did not ban it, he did not discourage furthering it like he did in the first arc, he actually encouraged more research into it. Just like a scientist and an academic, when something is proven, you encourage more research to improve it further. And in this case, more experiments are needed to ensure its effects are well explored. He is not closed-minded and stagnant, quite the opposite actually. He is open to innovations when they are properly proven through the scientific and proper regulatory bodies and mediums. All he is asking is that the innovators of said technology ensure that it will work for the benefit of the people as they have intended. After all, he is a government official whose duty it is to serve the benefit of the people. All he is saying is about properly regulating a piece of very crucial and quite potent novel technology, which is what government is supposed to do, like in real life. Electricity, water, fuel, tools, weapons, I'm looking at you, America, and medication, among others, are regulated properly to ensure that they are used and affect the masses as intended for their benefit, at least ideally. So no, Heimerdinger is not an incompetent government official, quite the opposite. Jace and Victor are even lucky to be entrusted themselves with researching how to regulate and safeguard their own technology instead of being done by some third-party commission or something. Heimerdinger was very much amicable to Hextech after it was proven especially to work properly for the masses and for, well, the trade of the city, up until he saw the Hex Core, where if we look closely at this scene, at how this scene is portraying Heimerdinger, it looks like he was seeing and sensing something inside the Hex Core, and something was looking right back at him. Something familiar, and something actually there, and not just a vision like in the council chamber when Jace was being tried. So we discussed how his competence as a politician and as an academic are clearly right in his advices to Jace and Victor. But I believe in this last scene, before he got voted out, we are being shown his competence and correct assessment of Hextech, specifically the Hex Core, through his magical arcane aspect as a yordle. I suspect that this scene was displaying Heimerdinger's arcane connection, leading him to sense a similar corrupting magical power in the Hex Core, akin to the runes that were used in the Rune Wars. I mean, look at him, the perspective from inside the Hex Core, and how he feels what he is looking at is not just some vague vision, but something really presently staring him down right in front of him. Heimerdinger's stance on safeguarding and regulating Hextech more with further carefully crafted research is informed by his first-hand experiences with the corrupting power of the arcane magic, his competence and expertise in government, and he probably knows about the corruption going on with the mercantile class and academia, and furthered by his innate attunement to magical things as a yordle. He knows how corrupt Piltover can be and how magic can further corrupt individuals, leading to another possible Rune Wars calamity. But he does see the real innovations of Hextech, but all he asks of Jace and Victor is that it be ensured to work for the benefit of the people as Victor and Jace intended in the first place. Because, as the saying goes, the path to hell may be paved with good intentions, and an even better saying, a proverb actually from Tagalog, translates to "many die from mistaken thoughts." And that is exactly what happened at the end of Season 1.
What could have been?
Jace and Victor thought Hextech could do no wrong, and that giving the people, and especially the Undercity, access to it is what they must do. But when we actually see Hextech get into the hands of the Undercity to the powers that be underneath Piltover, it only resulted in more deaths throughout and at the end of the season. Exactly what Heimerdinger and the Tagalog proverb were warning against.
I wanted to offer my guidance, but it seems I'm unwelcome.
Heimerdinger is right.
Heimerdinger is actually a good governor, but he is far from perfect. But that is something perhaps we can explore another time. For now, these have been my thoughts, but what about your own thoughts, fellow minds? Do you agree that Heimerdinger was actually right in his stances in Season 1? Freely do leave your own thoughts below. I'd love to discuss them further. May our minds meet again soon, fellow minds. You are all always welcome here in Mine Mind.